get you kicked in on your home field.
This is not 1980s OSU.
Remember, always have faith in God. Have faith in yourself, and certainly have faith in God.
The new intro video needs a little bit of work. Threw in Eddie Sutton there. Always have faith in yourself, always have faith in God, and always have faith in the Cowboys, not necessarily in that order. I'm Carson Cunningham, joined as always by Colby Powell. This is the Pistols Firing Podcast. Colby, did you have a good trip to Branson over the weekend?
Great trip to Branson. Yeah, we got really lucky. Our outside day, it was like 74 degrees, sunny. We went down by it was like it's called Lake Taneycomo, but it was more like a river out by where we were staying. Water felt great. I got in, took a little dive. Water was cold, but it was like a good cold. The kids got in up to their knees or so. And we went and walked around Shepherd of the Hills. My daughter rode the mountain coaster. She's usually afraid of high speeds and other things, but she rode the mountain coaster. We were on the brakes a little bit throughout the mountain coaster, but she loved it. She was high-fiving afterward. And then we went and saw a show with some acrobats, and she's all about gymnastics. That's like her favorite thing in life is gymnastics. So she was over on her chair while the acrobats were going. She had her feet up in the air. She was hanging on the side of the chairs, and she's just been raving about it and asking to go back to Branson. So it was a great trip and a great weekend. How was your weekend here in the great state of Oklahoma?
I had a great weekend. My eldest stepdaughter, Nora, was in a production of The Little Mermaid. Her first, she did a shorter version of that a few months back. This was like a 3-month practice, all the things that go into that at Stage 405. Shout out to them. Listeners of the podcast over there, Greg Rock and his wife are very involved with Stage 405. He listens to the podcast and said hello. And I had to get an energy drink while I was there. I was running on fumes. So shout out to them. They did an amazing job. It was really cool to see Nora kind of get up there on stage, branch out a little bit. And we had a great weekend. And I kind of had this moment of reflection while there and just over the weekend with them and just how happy I am right now in life. Things are going really well. I think I'm on month like 17 of sobriety. I lost track. I got a little counter on my phone I could pull up later, but never really been happier, Colby. So it was kind of one of those weekends you kind of stop and reflect and realize how lucky you are and to have good people around you, people that you love and that love you back. So it was an amazing weekend. I was still getting a lot of texts during the show about coaching candidates. I had to put my phone away because a lot of... And we'll get into all that. We have to get into the coaching search. We're going to get into Twitter questions. We didn't get to answer many last week. I kind of had to get on my soapbox a little bit about people trying to discredit me. And I think fortunately, a lot of people have realized I'm not just some Joe Blow with a podcast that just throws things out there. So we'll get into the coaching search, all the latest. We are kind of at 0 dark 30. It's going to be happening here in the next couple days, I would assume. I'll kind of get into what I've heard and haven't heard as of late. But first, let's hear from Chris's University Spirit, your one-stop Cowboy shop. Be sure to shop at chrisuniversityspirit.com. I want to see Section 231 grow next year with the new head coach. I want to see like that entire side of the stadium twirling their shirt over their heads. It's been amazing to see the growth there, and Chris's is your place to go get that gear and really all your Oklahoma State apparel needs. They've been with us for a very long time sponsors and supporters of the show. So we appreciate them sponsoring as always. Okay, Colby, I know you've been kind of out of the loop with the coaching search. You've been traveling, hanging out with the kiddo and your wife. Certainly understandable. We'll get into that. But first, Oklahoma State had a chance to win a football game. It looked really good for a long time. And I tweeted this after the game. I didn't know depths were this deep when it comes to a football program. You lose on ESPN Plus. It's not even on cable, first off. You've got this announced team that's like ESPN Z team, and I don't like to beat up on announcers. It's a tough job. I understand that. But
it was obvious this time.
Yeah, and UCF gets this interception to really end the game, and he calls it a pick six, like literally before the guy even went out of bounds, well short of the not only the end zone, but before he even went out of bounds, he called it a pick six. And I just tweeted like, I didn't know depths of football programs could get this low to now being essentially going winless in conference play, barring a win next week, and then losing in that fashion on that program with that announced team in that stadium. Like it's about as low as a football program can possibly be. It really is.
Carson, the last 2 trips to Orlando have been really depressing in different ways. Like in 2023, you just won the last Bedlam. You're riding that emotional high, and clearly you go down to Orlando totally unprepared to play football, just emotionally, mentally, physically, whatever, unprepared to play football. You get punched in the teeth. A monsoon comes through. You lose whatever it was, 40-3. I don't remember what the final was. I think it was 40-3. And then you go down there this year, and Carson, something about 2-10, like 2-10 has never had a nicer ring to it. Like I would have just loved to call this thing 2-10, and we're not going to make it. We're not going to make it. This isn't a 2-win football team. This isn't a football team capable of beating another FBS opponent, as we've seen. Again, mid-September of 2024, last time this team beat an FBS opponent, UT Martin in week 1 this year was FCS. And by the way, they only really put points up on UT Martin before Haas Haney got injured on the 3rd drive of the game. So it was very disheartening. It was a fun half. It looked like Oklahoma State might win one. And when UCF hit the long one early in the second half, it was like, oh no, we're gonna tighten up. Like we're gonna clinch up. We're not gonna be able to close this thing. We're not gonna be able to pick up first downs. We're not gonna be able to score. And I don't know what happened at halftime schematically with each coaching staff. What that second half was for Oklahoma State offensively, the defense was still fine. Like you have up 17 points in that half, but the defense was fine overall on the day and in that half. The offense in that second half was just, it was embarrassing. It was putrid. And quite frankly, Carson, this team, I feel really bad for all of the players and the coaches who have worked so hard this season to try to get that one win. And they were so close to that one win. But this is a 1-11 football team through and through. And they just, most of the year they've been getting blown out. But when they've had a couple of chances along the way, they have just invented new ways to lose games. So it was a tough scene at the end there in Orlando.
We thought 3-9, your famous song. I think we're going 3-9. That seems like a long time ago, doesn't it? I mean, you were hoping for 2-10 at this point.
You remember when we were calling 3-9 rock bottom? What idiots we were.
Yeah, we didn't know it could get this low, and quite frankly, look, we don't have to get all the reasons why, but it's shocking. It really is shocking that they're by far the worst Power 4 program in the country. 27 yards of offense in the second half. I mean, that's hard to do. It's hard to be that inept offensively. And look, we got a lot of Twitter questions we'll get to later in the show. Many of them centered on Clint Bowen, the job he's done on the defensive side of the football. I do think he deserves a ton of credit for kind of riding that ship, because let's face it, Colby, the defense was worse than the offense for a chunk of this season. And so I do think you got to tip your cap to him. Doug Meacham's been a great representative as the interim coach. He's an alum. He played with Mike Gundy. He's been around a long time in coaching circles, and I think he's done the best job he can, quite frankly, with the talent he has at his disposal. He's certainly to blame some. I think he's gotten a little too tricky at times, like last week with the trick plays, but I do want to give him a lot of credit for holding this thing together, because they have been competitive lately. I mean, yeah, they lost again, but they didn't go and lose 40-3 like you mentioned the last time they went to Orlando. So a lot of credit's deserved there. I don't think, and look, we have a lot of Twitter questions about Clint Bowen. I think we should just address him now, Doug Meacham now, in terms of, Oklahoma State's going to hire a new coach presumably this week. What say you on, a lot of people wondering if Clint Bowen should be retained? Is there a spot for Doug Meacham on this staff? What's your opinion on that?
No, of course not. I just, that's the most obvious answer to me in the world. And that's not to like overly criticize these guys, but this is one of the worst seasons in the history of modern collegiate football. And these two guys are part of that. You're starting from scratch. I appreciate Doug Beacham's positive outlook this entire season. I think he said all the right things in front of the microphone. They've clearly gotten through to this team. Clint Bowen has gotten through to his defense. Like, they're playing hard. I appreciate what they've done to put the work in and try to make something of this season, even though the results haven't panned out. But this is just the most obvious case ever that you just scrap it all and you start from scratch and let whoever comes in fully build his staff from the ground up. I mean, if that guy looks at Clint Bowen and decides that he's going to run the defense, but are we really doing like a 2-3 week sample size on Clint Bowen for one of the worst seasons in modern collegiate football history as like this guy should be retained to run the defense? Let's keep in mind, this is the second time that Doug Meacham and Clint Bowen have been somewhat architectural in the worst seasons for the worst teams in modern collegiate football. These were the two guys who were doing it in Lawrence whenever everything broke down in Lawrence. It's just, I get it. This team has been so bad and we got so used to giving up 45 that all of a sudden you play a couple of mediocre opponents and you have a couple of decent defensive showings. Again, I feel like my tone here is coming off overly critical of guys that I'm genuinely appreciative of for taking over the reins in a no-win situation. But no, you're not keeping these guys. You're starting from scratch, Carson.
Yeah, and I certainly would agree with that. Look, Clint Bowen has done a very good job. He's allowed an average of 15.5 points and 340 yards of offense. Like that's really good defense. It really is. But that's just not how these things work. You're right. It's going to be a clearing of the deck. And sure, when new coaches are hired, they do interview current staff, see how well they are aligned, how well they did in their current role. And I think those conversations will take place. And certainly there could be a spot for a Clint Bowen, not as defensive coordinator, I wouldn't anticipate, but maybe some other role on the defense or on staff. I certainly wouldn't rule that out. But you got to understand, when you're hiring a new coach, his you-know-what is on the line. And he's going to hire people that he trusts, people that he's been in the trenches with, and people that he think will do the absolute best job possible. They're not going to be real fired up to retain coaches from a previous staff. They're just not. But you have seen that in the past with other jobs where, let's say, I remember at Florida State, they had a defensive line coach, Odell Haggins, been around for a long time. He was just getting dudes, just 5 stars galore. His unit was elite. Well, he got retained by Jimbo Fisher. Like, there was no reason to get rid of a guy like that. I don't think Clint Bowen's necessarily in that position, nor is Doug Meacham. I think maybe they could be analysts. I think that would be a good spot for them to stay in Stillwater, not have to move. I think that's certainly something that could happen. But all in all, Colby, a clearing of the deck is necessary, and Oklahoma State's season will mercifully come to an end this week. And that's what leads us to the coaching search. I know a lot of people tuning into this to see what I have to say about it. And I'll just lead with this. It has been radio silent. And what that tells me is they're either making a hire currently or it's been made. And a lot of misinformation has been thrown out. A lot of people have, like, I've actually heard, Colby, from people that I haven't heard from in a while. And it directly conflicts with what I've maintained now for about a month and a half. And so I'm sitting there thinking about it, and I don't trust that information. And so I don't put it out there. And that tells me that I think a lot of things are happening here behind the scenes. Either they're trying to put pressure on their top candidates, because you've seen and heard Colin Klein's name come up a lot this week. And I've maintained since the jump, I reported as these interviews happened. First, it was Alex Golish. I maintained he was the top candidate. I said Eric Morris is right there in a tier with him, 1A, 1B. Below that, and Colin Klein interviewed after those two, I would put Colin Klein and Kane Womack and Zach Robinson in that next tier. And nothing's really changed on that front. And I do want you to pull up the text that I sent you, I think it was 10 days ago. And while you do that, let's hear from Greg McElroy, who I think does a fantastic job calling games. He's put aside his Alabama ties, calling SEC games. I think him and Sean McDonough, for me, have become one of my favorite teams to listen to. McDonough's kind of crotchety. He's kind of like your grumpy uncle, but he's really good at calling games, and I think McElroy's really top-notch. Well, back in December when Mike Gundy and Chad Weiberg were having their showdown talks, I said then that people need to trust Chad Weiberg, that he's got a plan, he's got funding in place, he's got this thing ready to roll if they decide to get rid of Mike Gundy. And basically now, I think you're just now a year later starting to hear from national people everything I heard back then, and you've heard other outlets reporting that. I think Football Scoop reported that, compared to Arkansas, Oklahoma State's in way better position. They have their ducks in a row far more than Arkansas does. And so I think Chad Weiberg deserves a ton of credit, as I said back in December, and now you're hearing a guy like Greg McElroy say what I've been saying for close to a calendar year now. Take a listen.
The Big 12 has, I think, a job opening right now that not as many people have great admiration for. But if you talk to people within the coaching search world, you talk to people within the agent world, and you talk to coaches, the Oklahoma State job is highly desirable. And what does every coach want? They want continuity. They want comfort. They want to know that they're going to be somewhere for a very long time. So the fact that Mike Gundy was there for 21 years, one of the longest tenured coaches in college football, makes this job very appealing. What also makes this job very appealing is they are very competitive from an NIL standpoint compared to some of the teams they'll be competing against in the Big 12. They also have another thing going for them. They have a ton of infrastructure in place by way of skyboxes and a great game day atmosphere that continues to flush a lot of money into the program. So this is a really appealing job. Frankly, I wasn't sure how appealing this job was until I talked to other people that are in this world, and they say, no, man, like Oklahoma State's big time. Like that's one that people will leave a good situation for to become the head coach at Oklahoma State. So kudos to you folks, because man, they are very well respected, which is why I think this search will end up bringing Eric Morris in from North Texas. Eric Morris, like I said a moment ago, in regards to Arkansas, there's a lot of people that are in pursuit of Eric Morris. But it sounds like, given that Eric Morris has some options, the one that he might most prefer is Oklahoma State. They're going to modernize their offense, which is something that has not necessarily happened very well with great success in the last few years. They want to re-energize a fan base that is very, I think, appreciative of a guy that's chosen them, and they can rest easy knowing that the guy that takes this job will have probably turned down other jobs as well. If it's not Eric Morris, I could see it going in the direction of Alex Golish at USF, who has kind of been linked to a couple other spots as well. But it feels like right now Eric Morris is the number one candidate for the Pokes, and I'd be surprised if it's not him at the end of the day. And then one other off-the-radar candidate is Colin Klein, who's currently serving as the offensive coordinator at Texas A&M. But I think in a perfect world for Oklahoma State, they want a guy that has some head coaching experience, and Eric Morris can check that box.
Well, there you have it, Colby. He said a lot there. We'll get to the Eric Morris portion of that, but sure sounds like Greg McElroy's been talking to the right people and is in tune with what's actually happening at Oklahoma State. I know USF fans won't want to hear that, acting like they're all big and bad and have more NIL money than Oklahoma State. That's simply not true, and they're not even at the same level as a football program. But that's a guy that has talked to the right people, that understands the situation Oklahoma State's in, and this is where, for all of the Chad Weiberg detractors that are still out there that have said he's not done a good job, look at the state of the program, he should have got rid of Mike Gundy, blah, 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 blah. Look at the position Oklahoma State has put themselves in this new era. Despite Mike Gundy cutting out Chad Weiberg's kneecaps and eliminating a ton of financial support, he has held this thing together with glue and Band-Aids to where now you have top candidates in the country. Eric Morris, Alex Golish, I've maintained since the beginning they're the top two candidates. Golish out in front. That's the position they're in now, Colby. They're not just going to have to go settle for Joe Blow coordinator from the MAC or some off-the-radar name that we're not familiar with. That's the position Oklahoma State is in.
Yeah, and that audio there from Greg McElroy is very validating for what you and I have been saying on this podcast. It's very much, we told you so. And I think that as Oklahoma State goes 2 straight years without winning a conference game and can't beat an FBS opponent in more than a calendar year, it's going to end up being 2 years in between FBS wins. I think it would be easy for people to have accused us of being homers, to have sat here when Mike Gundy got fired and for the last 7 or 8 weeks and saying, this is a great job. That's all we've said since Mike Gundy got fired is this is a great job. And I absolutely understand how someone could listen to that and think, who are these homers hosting what's called a Pistols Firing podcast, wearing orange T-shirts, talking about this being a good job? Yes, we both attended the school. Yes, we both love Oklahoma State. It's so obvious that Oklahoma State is well positioned in the Big 12 to put together a full court press for some of these top tier candidates in the country. And to have Greg McElroy, who like you said, has really ascended throughout the tiers of college football voices, college football personalities. He's really plugged in. He's really connected. He does a great job. He's not a shock jock. He's not out here constantly saying outlandish things, just, throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. He's not one of those guys. He's a very measured person in what he says and what he doesn't. And he's hearing the same things that you've been hearing, the same things that I've been hearing, which is that Oklahoma State has serious financial backing. And what it came down to for me, Carson, was always a trust and a belief that Chad Weiberg understands how important it is for all of Oklahoma State athletics, for the university as a whole to be well positioned in football as things continue to shuffle in the NCAA with college sports, with NIL, with the portal, with legalities of these situations, with salary caps, with revenue sharing, everything that is changing and constantly evolving in college sports. The only way that you can evolve with it is if you have the finances to evolve with it. And the only way that happens is if you are continuously successful at football. So these gap years Oklahoma State has taken in football success are actually falling at a perfect time. They're falling post the last conference realignment when OU and Texas left and the Big 12 solidified things, but they're falling before what's going to be the next conference alignment whenever TV contracts are up here in another 5 years, another 4.5 years. And if you can get things back on track by then, you're still well positioned to be one of the programs that big time conferences and things want whenever things get shuffled again, to put you in a position to be successful, not for the next 5 years, but for the next 20, the next 40, the next 50 years, whatever college athletics is going to look like in that time. You have to get football right. Chad knows that. People in the Oklahoma State universe with big time money know that. And I just always believed that this was a good program. And Carson, also hearing that Arkansas and Oklahoma State both want Eric Morris, and that if Oklahoma State chooses Morris, he's going to choose us. That validates what I said a few weeks ago when I made the people in Fayetteville mad. I'm like, Oklahoma State is so clearly a better job. Do not just shout SEC into the void. You can't just look up at the sky and yell, SEC! And all of a sudden, you're a better job than Oklahoma State. That's not how it works. So, yeah, this just hearing that from someone like McElroy, all very validating for what we've been saying. Yeah, there's the music. SEC! SEC! See you later. If we want him, we're getting him.
No, I mean, I got to give you credit. You were 1,000% adamant that Oklahoma State was a better job than Arkansas, and I think that's certainly the case based on not us saying it. Everyone else is finally coming around on that. And so let's address what he had to say. Eric Morris, the steam's picking up on him, and I think a lot of people have asked me questions, and we'll get to Twitter questions later too, but a lot of people have asked me, do you still think it's Alex Golesh? Do you still think it's Alex Golesh? I would like for you to read a text that I sent when it was right around when I tweeted that Alex Golesh was the leading candidate. It was November, I think around 15th, was it?
Yeah, I've got it here. It was Saturday, November 15th at 3:11 p.m. This was shortly after USF had lost to Navy. So they lost to Navy. That pretty much took them out of conference championship stuff and college football playoff type stuff. And you sent me a text that Golesh loses. He's going to get the, quote, you in or out call from Chad this week. And that's all you said. He loses. He's going to get the you in or out call from Chad this week. And then we had our show last week. I know you expressed great confidence that he was going to be the guy. And I know you and I have talked, and there's been very little coming out of Stillwater lately as we get very close to the end of this process. So, that was 10 days ago.
Yeah, I mean, for me, nothing has changed from that standpoint. I've maintained, and I still maintain, that Alex Golesh has been the leading candidate for this job. Got the first interview over those other candidates. Nothing's changed my mind on that. And that's where it gets murky, in that OSU has a very different timeline than Alex Golesh does, and certainly has a way different timeline than Eric Morris does, trying to get into the playoff, trying to win his conference, get in the playoff. And that's where I think you're going to see how this all shakes out. And the fact that we've heard nothing at all, I think, is a credit to Chad. I think he's locked it down. He's tired of me saying things on here that have been proven to be accurate time and time again. And so I don't have any more information as far as, yes, Chad Weiberg offered him the job. Yes, he turned it down. That's why they're going for Eric Morris. I don't know those things. I don't come on here and pretend I know things I don't. But if I had to look at this based on the information I have, nothing's changed since that text I sent you. In terms of, I would posit a guess. This is a guess. This is not me reporting, that Alex Golesh had a deadline, didn't meet that deadline. And if you send out a deadline like that, you got to hold to it. And so I think that's why you've heard very little about Alex Golesh lately. That's why Colin Klein's name has started to come up lately, which, again, I still maintain that Klein was a rung below Alex Golesh and Eric Morris, that nothing has changed in that, in my mind. So why is Colin Klein's name getting a lot of smoke lately? Why is Eric Morris is getting more smoke than Alex Golesh? Those dots for me are very easy to connect based on what I've reported, based on what I've been told. And so, and I'm not sitting here saying Alex Golesh is out of it. They could introduce him as the next coach this weekend. I don't claim to know those things. But if you look at this just from you and I looking at this thing based on what I've reported here, why Colin Klein's name would come up, perhaps, again, this is just pure speculation, perhaps he's more willing to meet Oklahoma State's timeline, because, again, they have a very different one than Eric Morris. They want to coach in here ASAP. They have a lot to get accomplished. Maybe Colin Klein would be more willing to depart A&M in the middle of a playoff hunt to go be a head coach in the Big 12. Maybe Eric Morris would be willing to commit and then coach out the rest of the year while having some staff in place in Stillwater. I don't know all those things. But for me, that's why I think you're starting to hear. And I do think Oklahoma State probably wants Colin Klein and Eric Morris's name out there. Again, I mentioned people. I had several people reach out to me. I haven't heard from them in a long time, trying to tell me certain things that conflicted with everything I've said. And that, to me, says that they want that to get out to an Alex Golesh or an Eric Morris, that, hey, we got Colin Klein right here. You better commit. This job isn't going to be open forever. We got Colin Klein. Now, maybe he'll be the next coach. I don't have that information. But that's where we're at, Colby. Nothing has changed in terms of Golesh being the top candidate. But certainly, as I mentioned when I came out and said that I thought he'd be the next coach, that things can change rapidly. And perhaps Golesh is trying to get more money. I don't know where the negotiations stand with him. But that's what, if I had to lay claim on what I think's been going on, I think that's what's been going on. I think they couldn't get a commitment out of Alex Golesh, so maybe they're going down to the other two candidates. And certainly that's not to disparage the other two. I mean, I would be thrilled with an Eric Morris. I would be thrilled with a Colin Klein. I would. But for people out there saying, oh, Carson was wrong, if they don't hire Alex Golesh, nothing I've reported is inaccurate. I mean, he got the first. You
didn't report they were hiring. You never reported that they were hiring Alex Golesh. You reported that they have been in talks with Alex Golesh, and that you gave your opinion that he would be the next guy, but you never reported that he would be hired. So that's kind of that's a moot point.
Right, exactly. And so that's where it stands. Again, Chad has locked this thing down. I haven't heard a peep for days. Very little information is coming out. So that's kind of where we stand here. Now, I do understand, like, could they hire Eric Morris during the playoff run? I don't know how that's going to play out. Like, let's say he is the guy that they want to hire, and I'm sure many people up in Stillwater do. I don't know how that's going to play out. We haven't really seen, I think Brian Kelly left Notre Dame in the middle of a playoff chase. Were they already in the playoff at that point? I can't remember. My memory's fading.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't know.
But we've seen it somewhat in his case. We're seeing right now with Lane Kiffin what's going on there, and I do think the Lane Kiffin element has played a role in this. I do think it was.
I was going to ask about that with Golish specifically.
Yeah.
If the Lane Kiffin element, because I think Florida went all in on Lane Kiffin with almost no backup plan, and then LSU got in the game with $100 million, and now Florida's scared. And I think that Florida has almost kind of put Golish on the back burner as their backup candidate in case they don't get Kiffin, which I think could be complicating the Alex Golish to Oklahoma State of it all, and could have potentially made it to where Golish wasn't comfortable meeting a deadline if he could potentially get that Florida job, which is a better job than the Oklahoma State job.
Yeah, and I certainly think that could be the case. I do think, Alex Golish is a hot commodity. His name's been thrown out a lot with the Arkansas job as well. And I do think it was huge that Florida State retained Mike Norvell. I had heard that Florida State was pretty high on Alex Golish's list. If that job came open, I think he would have been very, very interested in it. That's off the table. And again, let's just think about this logically, Colby. This is a negotiation. If you're sitting there telling Alex Golish, we're moving on, and he doesn't hear anything nationally from reporters or any scuttlebutt that, Colin Klein's name's all of a sudden hot and that Eric Morris is the leading candidate now, you're hearing other places. I haven't reported that. Why would that all of a sudden get out when everything's been radio silent? Maybe they wanted that to get to Alex Golish's camp. Maybe the search firm wanted a little more public negotiations, so to speak. So that's kind of where we're at. And I'm like you. I think you and I don't want to speak for you, Colby, but I think you'd be thrilled with Alex Golish and Eric Morris, right?
Yes, if I were ranking my excitement on a scale of 1 to 10 for the three guys who I think could potentially get the job, Golish and Morris would both be a 10. Klein would be about an 8. Still be really excited with Klein. He's never been a head coach. A&M has a lot of money. Mike Elko's been good everywhere he's been. I love that Colin Klein's a Big 12 guy. I think he would be successful. I'd still be very excited, but I'd be more excited for Golish or Morris. So 10, 10, 8 is how I would rank my excitement for those three candidates.
Yeah, I think that's pretty solid. I mean, I think Golish and Morris are 10s. I would say Klein's in the 8 to 9 range too. With Colin Klein, he hasn't been a head coach. That's always an unknown. But again, you look around the top coaches in the country; they were coordinators when they were hired. I mean, you can go on and on and on down the list of great coaches that were coordinators before getting that ultimate head coaching job. I do find it interesting that Kane Womack is now on everyone's hot board, everyone's coaching search list. Everyone just puts. Has anyone else reported that he's a finalist besides me? Maybe people have behind paywalls. I don't have subscriptions everywhere and all that, but maybe other people have reported that. But I do find it interesting that I reported that he was a finalist and was very involved in the job, and now all of a sudden his name's everywhere. I did find that interesting because I think his name's high on Arkansas's list as well.
I would guess his name's definitely high on Arkansas's list. I don't think anybody I didn't know who Kane Womack was. I mean, I knew who Kane Womack was in like the general sense of, that name rings a bell from when South Alabama came to town, and he gave a good post-game interview and talked about his program and hyped up his guys, and I remember that and loved all that. But as far as him linking up with Kalen DeBoer, and like if you would have just asked me a month ago, hey, top of your head, who's the DC at Alabama? I don't think I would have just immediately been able to rattle off Kane Womack.
Hand up, I couldn't have. Don't really follow the SEC day in, day out. That's why when I was told that name, I was like, let me do a little more research here. And sure enough, his name's now out there everywhere else you can find. But Colby, I did make a point on Saturday to watch North Texas. And I hadn't watched a ton this year. I'd seen highlights. I know Mestamaker's a really good quarterback. But I got to say, I was wowed. I mean, they got down early, 14-0 to Rice. That Mestamaker kid, holy smokes. He was throwing under pressure. His deep ball looked incredible. And you know who actually stood out the most to me was not Mestamaker or the tailback out of Shawnee. It was Wyatt Young, their little...
You think?
The wide receiver had over 200 yards. That dude is a baller. I mean, so if you're making the case for Eric Morris, I'm going to listen. I mean, I could. There's a lot to get behind with not only just his offense, the amount of points he's scoring, the fit nature you get with an Oklahoma State, him being a Texas Tech alum. his connections in Texas. But if you're able to plug and play those three dudes on the offensive side, bring them to Stillwater, you're cooking with gas, man. I can certainly see why people would favor Eric Morris over an Alex Golesh for some of those elements, not just Eric Morris being the offensive mind that he is.
Yeah, I think it was 3 or 4 shows ago, I told you I thought that the easy button for Oklahoma State to potentially just bring someone in who, like, September 1st, 2026, the offense is modernized, we're scoring a bunch of points, let's go win some games 46-42. Like, I think that guy is Eric Morris because of what he would be bringing with him, which would be Drew Mestemaker, who on Saturday in that game was 19 of 23 for 469 yards and 3 touchdowns. And why? By the way, Mestemaker, redshirt freshman. Wyatt Young, the receiver you mentioned, he's a sophomore. His line against Rice was 8 for 295 and 2 touchdowns. 295. Carson, receiving yards. I'd have to go look. I would guess Oklahoma State does not have a receiver on the roster this year with 295 receiving yards. I'll do that exercise here in a moment. I'd also like to point out that earlier this season, Drew Mestemaker threw for 608 yards in a game that North Texas won against Charlotte on October 24th. So, again, Golesh is a 10. Morris is a 10. This offense, Carson, what they're doing, what Mestemaker is doing, throwing the ball around, and like you said, he is impressive with the way that he rips it. So, yeah, I'm in on either one of these guys. And yeah, if you watch North Texas's offense, it would be easy to let yourself get really excited about what the potential could be. Here we go. Oklahoma State. I stand corrected. Oklahoma State has 3 receivers with more than 295 yards this year. Gavin Freeman has 435. Terrell Davis has 316. And Shamar Rigby has 299. Again, Wyatt Young had 295 receiving yards Saturday for North Texas.
Tell you, I'm buying what Eric Morris is selling. That's for sure. And Cowboy fans, if you're looking to sell or lease your commercial property, turn to Wolf Corporation, Oklahoma's trusted commercial real estate listing brokerage since 2010. Their experienced team specializes in showcasing your retail, office, or industrial space to the right buyers and tenants across the state. They're based right here in Oklahoma, and they deliver results with local expertise. You can visit them at wolfcorporation.com. That's WULF corporation.com, or call 405-308-3480 today. Go Pokes. And I did hear, Colby, from Wyatt Wolf of Wolf Corporation. He sent me a very, very nice note thanking us for everything we've done for him on the show, how we've kind of integrated they redid their website, graphics, and he was very appreciative of that and had great things to say about you and I doing the show together. So shout out to Wyatt Wolf. His dad Ray's not a long-time listener, but he's listened lately, and he likes what we've done with the show. So we appreciate Wolf Corporation. Great people. If you have a need, they can certainly fill that in terms of selling or leasing your space. So appreciate them sponsoring the podcast as always. So, yeah, I think that's kind of where we stand with the coaching search. I don't think we're going to hear until, a Brett McMurphy or a Chris Lowe report who's been hired. I have no insight on that other than, again, just to wrap it up. I mean, I've been pretty on top of this search from the beginning that, Golesh and Morris in one tier, Colin Klein and others in the next. And so, to me, we're not going to be privy to how those negotiations go to ultimately sign on the dotted line. A lot goes into that, a lot. And I'm just curious, Colby, about the timeline. How strict, if you're Chad Weiberg, can you be with that timeline? Because I get it, right? You got so many moving parts with December coming and signing day and all those things and the portal. But you also want to get the right coach. Like, I do think if Chad Weiberg believes that Eric Morris is the guy, I think you got to wait. I think you got to try to piece it together. If you lose out on some recruits, so be it. If you lose out on a few NIL guys, so be it. And you got to kind of just try and hit the portal hard in January and piece it together. And I think Morris would solve a lot of that problem by bringing in a quarterback and that freaking Wyatt Young dude. My God. So I'm curious, Colby. Would you stick to the timeline if you're Chad Weiberg, if Morris or Golesh aren't ready to commit, and just hire Colin Klein? Would you do that? Would you be happy enough with Klein and to not wait and get this thing going?
I would not let the timeline make the decision for me on who I want the next head coach to be at Oklahoma State. I think you're making a hire for the next 10 years. It's hard to project who's going to be the head coach here in 2050 or something crazy like that. But you're making a hire for the next 10 years. And as much as nobody wants to hear this, if hiring a coach 3 or 4 weeks later costs you 2 or 3 wins in 2026, but you get the right guy for the next 10 years, that's the trade-off you have to make. You have to prioritize the long-term health of the program. If you think that Golish is unequivocally the guy for the next 10 years to lead Oklahoma State to new heights, to win multiple conference championships, to get to multiple college football playoffs, then you get that guy here on whatever timeline you get that guy here. Same goes for Morris. And the reality is it could end up being a Steve Lutz situation. Steve Lutz was hired. Steve Lutz had a year one where he was behind. He was well behind on just getting guys in the door. He did the best he could to piece a roster together to be competitive. Again, Oklahoma State was not a disaster in year one in conference play under Steve Lutz. Oklahoma State won 7 conference games in the best conference in the country in year one under Steve Lutz with him piecing the roster together. And now in year two, they have passed their first couple of tests with flying colors. I was watching the Thunder game and the Oklahoma State game simultaneously last Wednesday, and all night I was just wondering who's going to score more points, the Oklahoma State Cowboys or the Sacramento Kings. And Oklahoma State ended up scoring more points against South Florida than the Kings did against the Thunder. So yeah, it could be a situation like that, but you go get the right guy. The sooner you can get him here, the better. But if you're telling me Eric Morris is the guy, he's going to be a smash at Oklahoma State for the next 10 years, if it costs you 7 or 8 guys out of high school that you're not able to get to commit, and you don't have those guys in the door for the 26th season, it is what it is. If that coach is the right guy, he'll figure it out whenever he gets here, even if there is a 1 year, let's get our feet underneath ourselves situation.
No, I totally agree with that. And I do think, too, it's not necessarily a bad thing if Eric Morris is on national television coaching in a college football playoff and they put his name up there and it says Oklahoma State head coach. You know, I don't think that's bad advertising if you're Oklahoma State with recruits. Like, hey, our current coach is in the playoff right now and putting up points. You want to play in that offense? How's that look? So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And I think I've gotten a lot of questions about Zach. And what you said about Steve Lutz is so perfect when discussing Zach. You know, I brought him up last December again when Gundy's contract was not going well. Think about when that was. That was December, first week of December, something like that. And all your top candidates are gone. Like, you're really kind of screwed at that point. I mean, you don't have any of the top names like you do this cycle ready and willing to come to Oklahoma State at that point. And Zach was kind of this perfect golden parachute, so to speak, that he could come in right away and wasn't beholden to any timelines with his current university. And it made perfect sense. And I think when I get questions about why Zach isn't the guy or what hasn't been the top name, is kind of what you and I have discussed now for a month. There's just better candidates out there. There's guys who have done it in this era, who have been head coaches, who have rebuilt programs from the ground up, like an Alex Golish, from Eric Morris taking over a program that had dipped after Seth Luttrell. He's just not as good a candidate as those two, and you're in a much better position to hire the best candidate this time around versus this time a year ago.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And you see some other universities that, whether it's for financial reasons or football reasons, are deciding not to move on from their current coach. You mentioned Mike Norvell at Florida State. How about Baylor coming out and announcing that they are retaining Dave Aranda? It seems like Chris Kleiman is going to be back at Kansas State. Like, yes, a lot of jobs have opened. We saw James Franklin. He wound up at Virginia Tech. Penn State's probably going to hire Matt Rule, Lane Kiffin. Who knows what's going to happen there? That domino is likely going to lead to the Ole Miss job coming open, which is a good job in the SEC, even if it's a tier below kind of those very top SEC jobs. There's a lot of good jobs open, but that's why you had to be out in front of everything, and Oklahoma State has been out in front of everything. So really impressive the way it's all been handled by Chad Weiberg. And I don't know, Carson, again, even if it's Eric Morris and he's in the college football playoff and we have to wait for him to get here, like, I need to know who the next head coach is going to be a week from today. Like, I need to know. I'm answering questions about it. I know you're answering way more questions about it than I am. Every time I log on to the Twitter, that's the only thing that's on there is the Oklahoma State head coaching search. It's just tweet after tweet after tweet after tweet. It's too much. I need to know who it is.
Well, one thing I'm 100% confident in, and I keep hearing this on sports talk radio, is like, whoever the new coach is, he's got Got a lot of work to do to get the fan support back. Got a lot of work to do. I heard that today.
Incorrect.
Like, you're not paying attention. Like,
Dumb.
you're not paying attention. They're the worst team in the country for 2 years now, and that stadium has 35,000 in it. Like, you're going to get 60 in there in a heartbeat with a new coach, just with any semblance of hope. And I do think whoever the coach is going to have a ton of support financially as well. So I'm ready for a coach to get hired, just so people that say things like that are going to learn that that's just not the case. So we need to get to
game days
questions.
in Stillwater, Carson. Game days in Stillwater are an event. Like, you're showing up to an event in Stillwater. People want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of it. I've already told you, like, I want Oklahoma State football. I want this to be the beginning of a great new era. Because, like, for me personally, my daughter's just getting to the age where she's going to be able to go and enjoy. We're not going to have to worry about nap schedules. We're just going to be able to go have fun. And, like, Stillwater's just the place to be on Saturdays. And I think we can count on the Oklahoma State fan base to show back up. And I would imagine it's week 1 next year. There's going to be complete buy-in. Everybody's going to be ready to go. Speaking of showing up, Brewster Consulting Group, they always show up. If any of these sound familiar at your company, processes that are manual and inefficient with no documentation, data reporting that takes forever and is not accurate, you hear all the hype about AI but have no clue what it actually means for your business, projects always running over time, always running over budget. If any of those sound like you, talk with our friends at Brewster Consulting Group. They help build organizations that run like well-oiled machines with clear processes, reliable data and reporting, and technology that actually works for you. They've worked for local clients like the Tulsa International Airport and Medify, and they've delivered solutions for large international enterprises like DP World. Even better, Brewster is founded and run by a proud Oklahoma State alum and season ticket holder. Learn more about them at www.brewsterconsulting.com or learn more about their methodologies by connecting with them at Brewster Consulting Group on LinkedIn or YouTube. Carson, anything else here? I know we promised the people that we would get to this mass amount of Twitter questions that we have waiting for us.
Yeah, I'm seeing on Twitter, in fact, Eric Morris is doing his press conference. This is where we're at with coaching search right now. Everyone's just clamoring.
Oh,
He's not wearing North Texas apparel at his press conference. That's where we're at, right? We're breaking down what Eric Morris is wearing at his press conference. What does that mean?
Final regular season press conference is underway. Yeah, I see it here. He's wearing okay, I'm going to break it down for the audio listeners. White hat, gray hoodie, black pants, black shoes, no North Texas logos, black and white. Carson, those are Oklahoma State's colors, black and white. Throw a little orange in there. We've got our next head coach.
Black and white. Yeah, that's pretty vague. That's just, I thought that was just summed up perfectly kind of where we're at. Let's see here. Let's get to some Twitter questions. Had a lot of questions about Jim Knowles. Ty Hotstrasser says, is Knowles still in play with whoever we hire as head coach? That kind of is tied into what I mentioned about interviewing current staffers, which the next head coach will do. Look, it's no secret that Jim Knowles has ties to Oklahoma. I believe his new wife is from here. She has a kid in high school that plays football here. That's why, like, rewind the calendar a year ago, Brent Venables in Oklahoma were in deep discussions with Jim Knowles. I mean, all my friends over at Sooner Scoop were reporting on Jim Knowles for weeks, in fact, that they thought he was going to come to the University of Oklahoma to be the DC with Brent Venables. And I think, like, those guys are really solid reporters, very diligent. I have no reason to question that. So that tells me that he was interested in coming back to the state of Oklahoma. So it's no mystery that there's a lot of pull to this state for Jim Knowles. You throw in the fact he's now out of a job at Penn State and that James Franklin has hired a DC at Virginia Tech, not named Jim Knowles. That's a very, very, very easy dot to connect. And so for me, it comes down to who Oklahoma State decides to hire. What's their relationship like with Jim Knowles? Do they have one at all? Would they be open to that, or do they want to bring in their own guy? That's something that's impossible to predict. But I certainly would think that Chad Weiberg and the powers that be at Oklahoma State, who have probably been in touch with Jim Knowles, would like to arrange a meeting with whoever they decide to hire and see how it goes. And if you're that new coach, Jim Knowles is the top paid defensive coordinator in the country. Like, are you really going to say no to that? Would you really rather just hire the guy you know and trust versus the top defensive coordinator in the country? I don't know. That's really an unknown right now for me, Colby.
Yeah, Brandon Long asked about Jim Knowles as well, if we're hearing anything on that front. I'm not hearing anything on that front, but I'll tell you this much. Whether it's Alex Golesh, Eric Morris, Colin Klein, you come in, you want to win the fan base over day one, announce Jim Knowles as your next defensive coordinator hire. I would imagine whoever gets this job is going to be fully presented with every piece of information about everything that surrounded that magical 2021 season at Oklahoma State and how Jim Knowles was more or less the architect of that magic. He's the best defensive coordinator in modern school history. I can't speak to the 70s and the 80s. 1945, I'm sure that team had a great DC. He's the best defensive coordinator in modern school history. It would be a home run hire for whoever takes this job to bring Jim Knowles in. It would immediately get the fan base to be like, oh my God, it's happening. Like, it's happening right now. We're getting the absolute nuts with what would be the staff at Oklahoma State. So all the way in on Jim Knowles, and hopefully the next head coach has the opportunity to make that happen. Carson, want to read this one from William Schrum. Says, if it's Golesh, might QB Byram Brown follow for his 1 year left of eligibility? Hopefully others too. He adds, Morris potentially has a cachet of high-quality youngsters that would be huge to bring. Timing could be problematic, though. So Byram Brown, Carson, different kind of player than Drew Mestemaker, much more of a dual threat, thrown for almost 3,000 yards this year, 24 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, but he is far and away South Florida's leading rusher, more than twice as many attempts on the ground as the next leading rusher, and he's run for 904 yards and 13 touchdowns this year, so he has accounted for almost 4,000 total yards of offense, 37 touchdowns, 7 interceptions for Byram Brown. Like was mentioned there by William, 1 year of eligibility left. I'd guess there'd be a big chance that he'd be coming along with Alex Golesh if indeed Golesh decided to take the job.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, you see that everywhere. I keep bringing up John Mateer at OU, followed his offensive coordinator to the University of Oklahoma. That wasn't even his head coach. But, Golesh is essentially the offensive coordinator at South Florida. So that we don't talk enough about that element. We talk so much about Mestemaker in North Texas. We don't talk enough about how good of a quarterback Alex Golesh has. And I would fully expect him to follow Alex Golesh. I don't have any insight on that personally, but it makes a lot of sense for everyone involved. I had one pulled up here. I lost it. Okay, Tom Fegener says, On3's article suggested that Tier 1 candidates of Golesh and Morris, where have we heard that before, are both still flirting with other jobs, and OSU may just offer Klein, who leads the top of Tier 2. Where have I – that sounds familiar, Colby. I feel like I've said that before. If they can't get definitive answers soon, they'd hire Klein. Are you hearing anything similar? Well, I kind of mentioned that when we talked about the coaching search, Colby. I think that's if that's the case, that makes sense, right? I mean, if you can't come to an agreement with Golesh or Morris, or if they're still waiting on a literal offer from Arkansas or Florida or whatever job you think is out there that they'd be interested in, that's kind of what you do, right? When you start a coaching search, you got a list, and you go down the list if you can't come to an agreement. I don't have that information. I don't know if Golesh has turned them down. When I sent you that text and I've heard nothing different, at that stage, Eric Morris had not been offered the job based on what I've been told. I think this was before Baylor decided to retain Aranda, though. And since then, it's gone radio silent. And I had heard that if Baylor came open and they made a deadline to Golesh and he hadn't met it yet, that they were moving on. And they were not going to lose out on Eric Morris to Baylor. That was never going to happen. They weren't going to allow that to happen. And so I think now Oklahoma State has a little bit more leverage with an Eric Morris that Baylor's not open. I think that's a job that Eric Morris would take. Being a Texas guy, it's a great job Baylor is in their regional footprint there in Texas. It's a great job in terms of recruiting and all those things and financial support. So that's kind of, I wouldn't disagree with anything that Tom said that On3 said. I think that's kind of where we're at, and we're just kind of waiting to see how the negotiations shake out. Does Golesh turn it down? Does Morris accept? Vice versa? Or do they move down to Colin Klein and hire him? I think everyone would be thrilled with any of those three, and I think that's all I've got on it. That's kind of where we're at.
Yep, absolutely. I'll leave our previous conversation to stand on that so that we can get to some more of these questions. The Skipper asked, curious, what is the status on Haas Haney? Thought he was due back by homecoming. Haas Haney's not playing football again this season at Oklahoma State. He's already used his red shirt, but Carson, he's going to be granted a medical red shirt for this season. He played 3 drives against UT Martin, dealt with a surgery and an injury and a broken bone in his foot, didn't play the rest of the season. If he would have come back a week or two ago, I would imagine even just coming back for this last game against Iowa State, there's just no reason to risk a full year of eligibility, because you're also asking him to risk, if he is the talent that he looked like he might have been in week 1, if he can, whether it's at Oklahoma State or elsewhere, go on to have a great 2026 season as a starting quarterback somewhere at the Power 4 level. We're talking about a year of eligibility. That's 7 figures worth of cash, straight cash, homie, as Randy Moss would say. So it would be financially irresponsible for Haas Haney to have played, 2 or 3 games at the end of this season for Oklahoma State.
Yeah, and I do think that people have put far too much stock into 2 drives against UT Martin, okay? He did go 3 and out on his 3rd drive. People just forget that happened.
Only because he broke his foot, Carson. They just scored a touchdown if he was healthy. Look,
we don't know. Maybe he is the next Baker Mayfield. We don't know that. But to put all of the stock and all of the hopes and dreams of an entire football program on a Haas Haney is not fair to him, and it's just not realistic based on the lack of what we've seen, both not only at Oklahoma State but at TCU as well. So I think people have kind of pinned way too much time and energy on what Haas Haney's going to do. And again, if he has a better offer elsewhere, congrats, good luck. I mean, it's going to be incumbent on the next coach to see where he's at with Oklahoma State. Does he want to stay? Does he want to go play somewhere else? We'll have to see. We'll have to see. But people should not be losing sleep over the status of Haas Haney. They should be losing sleep over who the next head coach is going to be and what hires they're going to make on staff. Because I think we put a lot of stock in who the head coaches are going to be. Hiring your staff is crucial. Getting those hires right, as you've seen at the University of Oklahoma, he got those really wrong on the offensive side, did Brent Venables. Really wrong, to where he almost got fired, and he had to correct those hiring decisions of hiring who he felt comfortable with instead of hiring the best offensive coordinator you can, which is something we said a lot under the previous regime. I've lost my spot on the Twitter questions here.
Yeah, you're good. Just to backpack on what you were just saying, Haas is just still very much an unknown. The sample size is incredibly small, and the next head coach, if it's Golish or Morris, he's probably bringing the guy with him. If it's Klein, I would imagine him and Haas will have some big-time conversations. But yes, he's still very much an unknown. Carson, unless you have your other one, I was going to read this one here. Ghost of Henry Iba is asking you for any good Bob Berry Sr. or Jr. stories you'd like to tell. Says that he really enjoyed some of your past musings of the Berries. So anything off the top of your head that you can just rattle off for us?
Yeah, I brought them up kind of laying out my background in media and journalism. And look, Bob Jr. was a fun-loving, jovial man, God rest his soul. But make no mistake, he was a bulldog reporter. When he went after a story, it was eye-opening. What a diligent reporter he is, how many contacts he had throughout the state. That taught me at a very young age on how to report on a story. I distinctly remember the Bill Self saga. Remember Bill Self had for sale signs in his yard from Kansas fans who were upset with him losing in March Madness. And he was all over that story. He had on good authority that Bill Self was likely going to come to Oklahoma State. But what happened? He ended up winning the national title. And much like this coaching search, things can change. They are not set in stone. But no, when I think back to my time with Bob Sr. and Bob Jr., Bob Sr., of course, it goes without saying, is a legend. Very intimidating figure to walk into as a 22-year-old intern. I distinctly remember I got to work with him for 1 year at Channel 4 in Oklahoma City. And I went and shot Big 12 baseball. I got some highlights of OU, brought it back to the station, and I cut up some highlights and said, okay, Bob, there you go. I cut up the highlights. And he kind of looks at me like, what are you doing? I didn't have a shot sheet ready for him, didn't have the names, and total inexperience on my part. I edited the highlights. There's a couple runs. You can look it up and figure out who they are. No. he tore into me pretty good to where I had those things ready to roll from there on. And when I started to get on the air some, I don't hear my Oklahoma accent, but it's there. It comes out with certain words. And I did a story, and he sat me down in his office, and he goes, "Carson, say the word field." And I said, "Filled, football field." He goes, "Field. It's not filled. Say verses." I say, "Yeah, it's Oklahoma State versus Texas." "It's not verse, it's verses." Like if you want to do this business, you got to say the words right. That's not how those words are pronounced. And it was really kind of scary, but also like really what I needed to hear to do the job at the best possible way I could. So that was a really fun. And seeing Bob and Bob Sr. together was just a great thrill of my life, quite frankly. Bob Jr. would always come in and give Sr. a kiss on the cheek every single day. And my best Bob Jr. story, we're covering Oklahoma State, Texas Tech basketball. And Oklahoma State won, and Bob Knight is about to walk into the press conference room. And Colby, have you ever covered a press conference with Bob Knight?
God, no. Thankfully.
I mean, you could cut the tension with a knife. He walks in, he just stands. Oklahoma State has that table there you always see in Gallagher-Iba with the backdrop. He stands, and he goes, "Now, before any of you ask a question, I want you to think really, really hard about how good your question is. I want you to really think about it." You could just see the steam coming out of his ears.
That's amazing.
And no one says a word. I mean, I'm certainly not. I'm brand new into this business. I'm scared to death. And who do you think chimed in with the first question? The fearless Bob Berry Jr. So he immediately, almost immediately, once the silence kind of lingered for a couple seconds, launches into a question. And Bob Knight interrupts him and says, "Now you're sure you've really, really thought about the question you're about to ask me?" And Bob Jr. kind of chuckled and said, "Well, I hope so," ha ha, and asked the question. And it was actually a really good question. He got a really good answer. So that's one of, I have a million Bob Jr. stories I could tell, but that one always stuck out to me of, he wasn't intimidated by anybody. He didn't care how many games you won. He didn't care if you thought you were going to bully everybody. He wasn't afraid one iota. And that to me is, everyone knows Bob Jr. and what a great guy he was and how nice, and he certainly was all those things, but he was a legitimate journalist, and he was not afraid of big bad Bobby Knight. So that's probably my best Bob Jr. story.
That's a great one. Yeah, Bob Knight, I would imagine, was wildly, wildly intimidating. So good for BBJ. Carson from Buffalo K-State asked very simply, what are you most thankful for this year? I know you talked right off the top about your gratitude, but I kind of had one of those moments earlier today. We were just off the heels of our trip to Branson. And, Branson is like families and retirees, older people. And, we've got my family, my sister's family with us. So we've got 2 3-year-old girls. My nephew, he's about a year and a half old. So he's just stumbling around, walking all over the place. And we had many older people say, "Oh, I remember those days. That's so much fun," and all this stuff. And earlier today, I was at the McDonald's in Stroud unloading my daughter's car seat from my car and putting it into my mother-in-law's car. She's going to her grandparents for a couple of days, and we're going up there for Thanksgiving. And guy comes out to get in his car, and I'm like, "Oh, sorry, I'm in your way." He's like, "Oh, it's all good. I remember those days. Just enjoy it while it lasts." And I started thinking about it, and I'm so grateful to be in this phase of my life. My wife and I have decided to just have one child. She's amazing. Life is perfect. And we're just keeping it how it is. And I think that is allowing me to really ground myself in this moment in life and this time period. Like, I'm not going to get to do any of these things again. So I'm just trying to fully maximize all of these experiences with my daughter. She's my best friend. She's amazing. And yeah, I'm incredibly grateful to be in this phase of life. My wife is amazing. She's a great mother, a great partner. And I just, like you said, I can't think of, and I feel like I've always been very happy. I can't think of a time I've ever been happier. So I'm just incredibly thankful to be in the period of life that I'm in. That's very well said, man. Yeah, it's important to have those moments where you stop, because we're always so busy, always on to the next thing. That's wonderful, and you've got a beautiful family. So that's certainly what I'm thankful for too. Again, my wife
Sydney, her two girls are my everything. I'm definitely most thankful for them, but I'm also thankful for, again, I'm at the Little Mermaid production and I see two people with OSU gear on, and I'm just ordering my energy drink, and they both they go, "Who's it for?" I go, "Carson," and they both kind of look at each other like, they kind of point like, "Is that Carson?" I go, "You guys listen to the podcast?" Like, "Yep, we listen." I'm like, "Ah, great," and we kind of just talked about OSU and things like that. I'm so grateful that we get to do this show. I'm grateful that Marshall lets us do this show how we want to do it. We take some arrows sometimes for telling it like it is, and that's part of the business. You and I understand that. But I'm just thankful that people express gratitude towards us for doing the show, because we love doing it. We enjoy doing it, but it's moments like that keep me going, that keep me doing this, because it is a time commitment. You and I doing 2 shows a week during the football season, a show a week. There's times that I'm sure you don't want to do the show, and there's times I know I don't want to. But it's moments like that I'm thankful for, that remind me that, there's a great interest in Oklahoma State sports, and we are an outlet for people to consume that. And they know that when they tune into us, that they're not going to hear what the PR firm at OSU wants to hear, or what, the Candies and Rainbows Sunshine Pumping would say. And that's something I've always prided myself on, because that's how I talk about the team to my friends. When they ask me what's going on with OSU football, everything I say on here is what I would say to them, and that's the way I always want to do it. And I'm, again, appreciative of everyone who listens to this show and tunes in and says nice things. That's always nice to hear.
Yeah, look, my dad went to Oklahoma State. My mom is the biggest Oklahoma State sports fan I know. She goes to every football, basketball, and baseball game every year. She had Oklahoma State and Nichols on her phone for a second screen experience on Saturday so that she could just consume all of it. And I've been an Oklahoma State fan my whole life, started going to the football games when I was probably 5 years old, been to Gallagher-Iba many times, met my wife there, graduated from Oklahoma State. And to be a part of this show allows me to be a part of the Oklahoma State sports fan community in a very unique way, and a very humbling way, a very fun way. I love doing this show. It's allowed you and I to build a great friendship over the years. And yeah, very thankful for the show, for you asking me to do it 5-6 years ago, whenever it was, for all of our listeners who say hi when we're out and about, who tweet us all these questions, help provide us with some content answering their questions. And when we do the YouTube live shows and stuff, it's just, yeah, this is a special thing that we've got going here. Kyle for starting it, Marshall for keeping us around and supporting us all these years. So I think this is a special thing that we're a part of, and I'm glad that we can acknowledge that.
Yeah, I would echo all the sentiments, and we didn't get to all the Twitter questions, but I think that's a good place to wrap up. Again, my final thoughts are, I think Oklahoma State's going to have a coach here by this time next week. I don't know about after the clock strikes 0 on their game on Saturday, but I think things will get hot and heavy there going into, I think by December. I've said since the beginning, December 1st, that first week of December, I think we'll know who the next guy is. Again, no new information, but everything I've heard is pretty much lined up with everyone saying nationally now that, Golish and Morris in that tier. How those negotiations play out would lead to a Colin Klein. We'll see. But I'm thrilled with Alex Golish. I'm thrilled with Eric Morris. I'm thrilled with Colin Klein. I'd be happy with Kane Womack. I know some people wouldn't, but I'd be happy with him too. And certainly Zach, I think, would be a smash as well. So one thing's clear. Chad Weiberg's the real deal. I've been trying to say that publicly for more than a year now. I think people are starting to get on board, and I think rest easy if you're listening to this, OSU fans, that Oklahoma State football is in a position to compete for championships. I mentioned that figure of $40 million being injected into the program. How that's allocated, depends on the revenue sharing and all those things. But OSU football is ready to start competing for championships. They're going to have the financial backing. They're going to hire a really good coach, and I expect them to start winning at a very, very high rate, and I do expect them to compete for Big 12 championships. Nothing I've heard over the last few months has changed that. So it's been a rough year, Colby. Appreciate you doing this show. I'm incredibly thankful for you, and happy Thanksgiving, everyone, and I'll talk with you next week.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Oklahoma State basketball has another test against Northwestern on Thursday after a great win over South Florida. Game they trailed by double digits in the first half, end up putting up more than 100 in that game and getting the win there. So, everyone have a happy Thanksgiving. Be safe on the road, safe travels, all that good stuff. Carson, great show as always. We'll see soon, hopefully, who the next head coach is going to be at Oklahoma State. Thanks, everyone, for listening. As always,